I'm Richard Moore. This is The Pathfinder, where you'll find conversations with faculty, administrators, policymakers, researchers, really anyone making a difference in the lives of students at community colleges. It's a partnership between the Texas Success Center and the Texas Community College Teachers Association. Kelty Garbee joins us today to discuss her work at Educate Texas, an organization in Austin that works on education policy as well as program development in both K-12 and higher education. They were pioneers in the early college high school movement and have fostered a number of transformational programs that, as they describe it, strengthen the public and higher education system so that every student is prepared for educational and workforce success. Kelty is the program director for their STEM degree Accelerator, a project that seeks to address the state's projected shortfall of 1 million STEM workers by 2018. The project provides professional development to faculty in STEM fields, aligns math pathways from K-12 to higher education to career, and develops partnerships between industry and education institutions. In our conversation, Kelty talks with us about the approach she takes to her work, the people she's met, and the impact she's having on the state of Texas. Here's Kelty Garbee. So Kelty Garbee, thanks for being with us on the podcast today.
Thank you.
You work with Educate Texas here in Austin and Dallas, I guess is where y'all are headquartered. Can you tell us a little bit about Educate Texas and what y'all do and how you organize?
Sure. We are over a decade old, and we were created as a public-private alliance, so working with state agencies, private philanthropy, and state-level stakeholders. And when we first began, we were instrumental in helping bring the early college, high school, and STEM models to Texas in partnership with the Texas Education Agency. And over time, as we began working with more colleges and community colleges, we've expanded the number of areas that we're working in. So we created purposeful partnerships between K-12 and higher education, and are working all across the state in a number of different communities.
And so you were personally very involved in the early college high school program, but at the time, were you with Educate Texas or were you at TEA at the time?
I was at TEA, so we had counterparts between TEA and Educate Texas working together to get the early college and the STEM model up and running.
Yeah. So you learned a lot about the terrain and kind of how community colleges work and the relationship between them and the high schools. And
yes. And it was interesting working at the K-12 agency because even though I was located in a K-12 agency, so much of my work focused on helping K-12 and higher ed partners understand one another's language. And I came to recognize the important role that community colleges play, both in that model and in the state.
And it seems like a whole lot of what we're doing these days involves those kinds of crossing lines that, traditionally there was K-12 and there was higher ed. They had two different state agencies, two different cultures, everything seem very separate, and now that they're having to interact a lot more. So you were kind of early on seeing the need to cross those lines.
When I was at TEA, trying to help school districts and college partners figure out how to work together, we created a presentation called Speaking the Language of Your Partner, and it was kind of marriage counseling for K-12 and higher ed, kind of learning, for example, average daily attendance versus seat time, or understanding how funding works in K-12 on a different timeline than higher education. And so when the two partners were working together and trying to help one another navigate each other's systems, it was useful to understand what the pressure points were and the opportunities were in the context of K-12 and higher ed.
So now you're taking a lot of that experience and applying it to the project you're working on now. Can you talk a little bit about that? What is the STEM Accelerator?
Sure. Texas Regional STEM Degree Accelerator has a long title, but a pretty clear focus. So the idea was for regional teams of education and workforce to come together and identify a regional area of labor market need. So where there's a high demand for jobs and a need for students to have degrees and credentials in a particular workforce area, and then to smooth the education path to that workforce area. So there are 3 components to the project. There's faculty professional development, specifically focused on higher education. There's alignment of math pathways, so making sure that students are taking math that's aligned with the degree that they're in and the job they want to have. And then education workforce partnership, so increasing opportunities for education and workforce to collaborate.
Now, y'all could have done a lot of things. What made this compelling? I mean, why is this particular initiative kind of strategically significant to you and to Educate Texas and your partners?
It draws on our history working with early college, high school, and STEM academies where you did have K-12 and higher education working together. Mm-hmm. There's a big emphasis on education workforce partnerships nationally and in the state right now. So it combines those 2 elements. I think there's also a move toward regional and collective impact kinds of activities. So in many ways, it combines all of those elements into one program.
So how did you get into this? I mean, you didn't start out, as a little kid saying, I want to start a STEM Accelerator program one day. Your path to this is kind of interesting. Tell us about that.
My winding path.
Maybe you did as a small child. I don't.
No, I did not. Actually, my parents didn't attend college, and when I graduated from college, I felt really strongly that people should have the opportunity to go to college and have this eye-opening view that it provides. And so I was very interested in programs and opportunities that educate people. So my first job out of undergraduate was working at the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts doing fundraising. And through that, got really interested in public-private partnerships and education in particular. So when I came to Texas to attend policy school, I was looking at decreasing state funding of public higher education and ended up working at the Texas Education Agency, learning a lot about community colleges in Texas and seeing partnerships develop. So when I switched from the public side to the private side and came to work at Educate Texas, I was really interested in working under the umbrella of a community foundation. Educate Texas is affiliated with the Communities Foundation of Texas in Dallas. So right. It's a circuitous path, but really education, public-private partnerships, and resources are kind of the topics that I've been interested in.
I've always been fascinated in the paths people take and the way we tend to accumulate experiences in kind of serendipitous ways. I mean, you don't know going in that, this is going to be a theme that runs through a bunch of other experiences, but they all play a part in how you approach your work and what is going to jump out at you as significant. And you've had to navigate several different cultures. I mean, where you come from, and then Texas, that's kind of a culture shock, I'm sure. And then the education experience, there are different cultures that you've had to navigate there. What's that like? Because, I mean, you're having to deal with people all the time who have a set of assumptions, and they come from a different place in, metaphorically or geographically. How does that play out? That, I mean, we're not all the same. We don't all have those same backgrounds. How does that affect your work in the context of STEM Accelerator?
Sure. So I'm from a big family, so I like having people around me and learning about people, which I think is helpful. So, working at the state agency, I used to joke and say I ran an 800 number answering questions about early college, high schools, and dual credit, and built a lot of relationships with people actually over the phone as they were working to build early college, high schools. And so one of the interesting things about STEM Accelerator is part of the work is building a network across the state. So we have 5 regions participating in the project: Dallas, El Paso, Houston, South Texas, and West Texas. And there are unique aspects to all communities. But one of the interesting things, we convene the team leads on calls every 6 weeks, and then we also bring them together in person a few times a year. And they've been surprised, despite the differences in their communities and their projects, at some of the common struggles and challenges that they encounter. So
Right.
part of what we've tried to do in networking them is help them see the similarities between their projects and to problem solve together.
Nice. Yeah, so they're learning from each other, finding out they're not in this alone, that kind of thing. So they are unique in certain ways, but there are these commonalities too.
Yes, definitely.
So what has surprised you? I mean, when you got started in this, you probably had some ideas about what the issues were, how it was going to go, how people might respond. What's surprised you as you've gone along?
I think one of the challenges, and we know this but don't acknowledge it enough, is it's easy to have many partners sign on the dotted line and say, we will work together. The devil's in the details in terms of being able to find times for people to meet, make sure that all the different regional partners are on the same page, kind of get everybody moving in the same direction. So regional convening is a challenge. It also provides opportunities. So if you can get everybody moving in the same direction, together the groups can accomplish a great amount, probably more than any one institution could on its own. So I think that's one. And then another would be, we know the project is focused on STEM, and when people filled out their proposals, they said, we know that math is a challenge, but we don't know how to address it. So one of the things that we overlaid in the project was the alignment of math pathways, and purposefully sought out a partnership with the Charles A. Dana Center at UT Austin in order to draw on a really excellent resource that we have in the state to increase the resources for math and training of math faculty.
So just in practical terms, where do you think that the difficulty of getting people kind of going in the same direction lies? Is it I mean, I know with a lot of our folks around the state, it's just kind of a bandwidth issue. Everybody's busy, somewhere between busy and frantic all the time. And so getting them to just stop and say, the convening as you do, the attention they need to give to this project, is it just a time and attention scarcity? Is it that they really see themselves as different and don't want to be shoehorned into a broader initiative? Or what are the things that you see that make it hard for them to do that?
I think it's definitely a time and attention. So it's interesting. In a large urban region, there are so many competing priorities, and many resources often flow into large regions. And so sometimes when a large region gets together, people are meeting each other for the first time,
Yeah.
or they haven't seen each other in a long time because there's so many moving parts to keep up with. Versus some of our smaller or more rural regions where people are spread out and the driving time can be 2 or 3 hours. That's not to undercut the traffic issues in large urban areas. You may sit in traffic for an hour in an urban area, but you are traveling large distances in our smaller and more rural areas, and fewer resources flow to the smaller and rural regions. And so the other piece, I think, is when you're bringing together K-12, 2-year, 4-year workforce boards, employers, each one of those stakeholders, whether you're education or workforce, has a particular different lens. And so some of it is about getting everybody on the same page in terms of understanding what the needs of the partner organizations are. So K-12 and higher ed, everyone's trying to educate students, but it's happening at different points along the education pipeline, and there may be different pressure points for a college versus a school district.
So we've worked together on a few projects in the past, and y'all really helped us get our dual credit council up and running, which has been fantastic, and they've been very active, and I appreciated the support for us to do that. But it wasn't just financial support that y'all were providing. I found you were very helpful just in talking through our approach and how we were going to go about it. When you're dealing with people and trying to affect change, how do you build those relationships? Because it's more than just read a brochure and say, yes, I agree. It's about developing trust, developing familiarity with one another. Do you have things that you've found help people get to the point that, yeah, we're going to work together on this?
Yes. So, I mean, I think one thing is to understand what another person feels like they need to accomplish. So organizationally, if we can both lay on the table, here are the things that I'm trying to accomplish, and figure out what things we have in common. Mm-hmm. I think that goes a long way. But the other piece is having the opportunity to work together and get to know each other. So our team leads talk to each other on the phone. And then when they were convened in person and began to talk about their projects in more depth, they came back and said, now I know, I've heard Richard's voice on the phone, but now I know I sat next to Richard at a conference and we had a conversation with each other. So I think that gets to your point about building trust. But I think figuring out if there is low-hanging fruit kind of projects or accomplishments that we can make together to start to build the trust, mm-hmm. That helps people feel comfortable tackling larger challenges or projects together.
Stick around for more of our interview with Kelty Garbee. But first, let's find out about some upcoming events for our community college folks in Texas. Be sure to make your plans to attend this year's TCCTA convention up in the Dallas area. This is the largest gathering of community college folks in Texas, and there will be lots of programs covering more than 50 disciplines, as well as teaching hacks and time to meet up with friends across the state who share your passion for teaching. Visit tccta.org for all the program and travel information. And for teachers at community colleges, TCCTA has announced dates for its 2018 Great Teaching Roundup. This Master Teacher Seminar offers faculty in every discipline an opportunity to engage with colleagues, to share their success and challenges, and connect their gifts with their calling to teach. We'll be in Kerrville, Texas this year, May 21 to 24. For more information, email Katie Agnew at kagnew@tccta.org. Hope you can be with us for that. Now let's get back to the conversation. So as people are getting together and they're talking and saying, we're working on this, whatever the initiative is, and they're experiencing things, do you have feedback loops that feed information back to you so that so y'all can learn as you're going along from the teams you're working with?
We do. So we've taken an unusual approach with our progress reports and asked some different kinds of questions than what I've asked grantees in the past. So, for example, we ask, of the different partners you have, what's the expected level of contribution, and do you feel like you're on target, ahead of target, or behind target? And that's been interesting to watch the ebb and flow over the life cycle of the project as trust has been built and as the teams are tackling larger pieces of their work together. So I think that's one piece.
Have you changed direction as things have gone along? Have you learned we're learning as we go and we need to change our approach?
Definitely. In some of the regions, you write a grant proposal and 6 months to a year later, your grant is awarded, and mm-hmm. conditions may have changed either with the funder or in the region. And so I think on a 3-year project or even a 2-year project, there always needs to be flexibility to accommodate those local conditions. So you may find that an opportunity arises that you didn't know about at the beginning of your project, or one partner may have had a leadership change or is undergoing accreditation review and can't give as much attention in one of the time periods. So I think, as we're working with the teams, as we're reading progress reports, as we're getting feedback, we want to be flexible and accommodating. Everybody's still working toward the goal of smoothing the path and increasing the number of students with degrees and working with workforce partners. But we definitely need to accommodate the local conditions.
What do you think is happening right now that most encourages you? What are some of the good things happening in the state that you think we're moving in the right direction?
With regard to the grant, I've
Sure.
been really enthusiastic. In West Texas, they built an app that's available for free across the region or to anyone who wants, that shows students what courses they need to take to fulfill their certifications in K-12. In Dallas, the team is building a big portal that's a STEM faculty-focused portal, and there are resources actually for faculty, parents, and students in seeking out different job opportunities, what courses you could take in terms of professional development or for students. In El Paso, there's been really good synergy between faculty in K-12 and higher education. So they focused on some active learning, professional development for faculty, and then took that same information and invited STEM K-12 faculty to come and talk about the STEM blueprint and engage in some active learning activities together.
And so, we're talking about faculty, do you see good examples around the state of getting faculty together in groups that might otherwise not gather, either across disciplines within an institution or maybe community college faculty and high school teachers? Where's that being done well?
Definitely. So El Paso is one example, and they have a long history because of their work with early college high schools that sets a precedent for that. There are others. I just need to think of them.
Okay. Well, that's something we're seeing this great need for these days, and schools are somewhere between attempting to do it and finding ways that are actually working. But that felt need seems to be fairly ubiquitous right now.
One thing that we did in partnership with the Dana Center is there are faculty working at various institutions who have been the lead or very instrumental in the Dana Center Math Pathways work. We put together a conference call for faculty who are working in different regions of the state to talk through some of the opportunities and challenges that they had encountered while implementing the Dana Center Math Pathways work. And they were really thankful to have that forum, that group. So one of the things I learned is in West Texas, Midland College worked with some of their partnering institutions, Western Texas College and Howard College, and convened a group of faculty who are involved in the Math Pathways work to talk through challenges and opportunities related to that math alignment.
Now, it's a heavy lift because there's no way to leverage that. You have to get people together and person by person actively involved. Why does that matter so much? Talk about the difference that makes to go to that length.
I think it builds trust, familiarity. We have a different experience when we are sitting face-to-face with somebody versus virtual or online. And it's not that you can't use conference calls or webinars. It's just that those technologies need to supplement face-to-face, in my opinion. There's a great tool called Zoom that combines both. You can actually see a tile of everybody who is participating in the call. So there are some resources out there that bridge the gap between face-to-face and completely virtual.
So you were talking earlier about some of the good things happening around the state. what concerns you the most? What's the biggest cliff we might drive off of if we're not careful, or something you would especially say we need to get this right?
I think fatigue with multiple initiatives.
Yeah.
So whether it's at the departmental level or the institutional or regional level, the more that you can have groups agreeing on the general direction they want to go and have each of the partners contribute from their perspective with their resources toward a common goal, that removes some of the initiative fatigue. There is still the challenge of convening many stakeholders, whether it's within an institution or a region, but I think it makes it clearer if you are able to align resources and people behind a particular goal.
So how does talk about, because you're seeing a lot of this change at a lot of different levels, and you probably find yourself in contexts where you're talking about an issue among policymakers, either legislators or people who craft policy. You're talking about it at the regional level, the institution level, the department level, the classroom level. It's the same topic, but it feels very different when you're talking about it at each of these different levels. How do you navigate that? I mean, if you're a faculty member in a classroom, what do you, or if you were talking to a faculty member, what would you like for them to know that's happening in some of these other spaces that's having an effect on them, that if they knew it, it could help them kind of organize their thinking and more effectively?
Related to working at the regional level and getting on the same page, the book Redesigning America's Community Colleges has been on my desk and heavily marked up for about a year and a half. Mm-hmm. It's a tool that we gave to each of our regional teams, multiple copies, and worked through with the regional teams. And this idea that at the institutional level, there are changes that you can make both at the classroom level with staff and in terms of how the institution itself operates that help students be successful. So the idea of creating a smooth pathway for students that they can navigate that's logical. And I think when you think about the policy realm, from a faculty perspective, the thing I always think about is what is my sphere of influence? Mm-hmm. And I think faculty don't realize how important their voice actually is to policymakers, because you are where the work is happening and have the anecdotes and the experience that can have a big impact on policymakers when they are developing policy and making decisions.
So how does a group like ours, TCCTA, we have about 6,000 members at all the community colleges in the state, overwhelmingly faculty, but a large number of administrators, college presidents as well. How do we make the most difference in this space? I mean, how can an organization like ours help get us where we need to be?
I think taking opportunities to learn about the different issues and resources and finding outlets to speak with one strong voice. Mm-hmm. So if it's the TCCTA, providing recommendations or sending a letter or participating in other groups or sending a message to the Student Success Council, for example, policymakers pay attention when one region or one large group or a bunch of different stakeholders get on the same page and send a strong message.
Mm-hmm. So if you walk on a community college campus, what are the things that you look for? Are there some kind of signature items that when you see it, you know this college is engaging in an effective and a healthy way in creating change, or this college really isn't, that they're either not engaged in the effort to create these changes, or they are, but in a way that isn't going to last or isn't going to get the results they need?
Thinking about that question in the context of partnership and K-12 to higher ed transitions or getting students into the workforce, having an orientation towards student success and understanding what the perspective and experience is of students when they encounter the institution, and then going out of your way to remove barriers. So I think there are things, and I say this having worked at a state agency and the state level, sometimes there are policies and procedures that we develop and we don't always realize the impact that they may have on the field or students. So being open to re-examining policies and procedures if we find that it's creating a barrier for someone along the way. So whether it's K-12 or higher education, you can feel the energy on a campus and know if faculty and students are excited to be there.
Yeah.
And there's a certain energy that you just take away that's really positive when everything is working and aligned.
I really have that. When I go to a campus, you can tell that people say, I'm on the team, we're all working on this together, or I don't feel included, my voice isn't heard. And it's kind of in the air, you know it even before you know why. That's the way they do things.
Definitely.
So, yeah. I often hear from our members that people, the more abstracted they are from the classroom, the less they understand the situation of a teacher. How do you overcome that distance? I mean, because you're talking directly with faculty on most of the work that you're doing. How do you bridge that so they do feel heard and that they are heard, that what they're saying it makes a meaningful difference?
So much of my work has been at the network or systems level, and when I was working in the arts, I wasn't in the symphony performing the instrument, and I recognize that I'm not the teacher in the classroom. My goal and job is to make sure that the resources are there for the scientists to do their research, the teacher to have the impact on their students. And I always make a point of going back and talking to faculty and staff about what is your day-to-day experience, because even if you've been out of the classroom for 5 or 20 years, the experience of someone who's in the classroom today can be very different. And some of that is the different initiatives and the different conditions under which institutions are operating. So I think it is really important to talk to faculty to understand what the pain points are, what people see as the opportunities, and figure out a way through policy and the programs that we design to elevate what you're learning from the people who are doing the work.
Mm-hmm. So we're asking each of our guests on this show if they have 3 books that they would recommend. And the idea behind this is I mean, if there's a book on what you're working on, that's great, and you can include that. But if you have a favorite novel or anything else you just think the world needs to know about, so what 3 books would you suggest?
So I've mentioned one already, which is Redesigning America's Community Colleges, has been very instructive for my work and was a tool that I wanted to make sure people knew about.
I remember we talked about it a couple of years ago. I think we had just started working together.
Thanks to you, I learned about the book and read it and couldn't stop marking it up once I got it. So, and what's great about the book, other than guidance for institutions, is there's a wealth of resources that accompany it. So if you maybe don't have time to read the whole book, you can watch some of the authors doing presentations and find different resources that accompany it, where at an institutional level you could act on it.
We have conversations actually on our online network, thetexasnetwork.org, thetexasnetwork.org. We have modules that feature some of the authors of that book, just so they can see their face and hear them explaining it. Yeah.
So check that out.
Okay. All right. Number 1.
So what I'm reading right now is a book called Scot-Heron, Pieces of a Man. And what was really interesting to me about this is I know that he performed The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, but I've been learning a lot about his history and his impact. So he thought of himself as a poet, and other people viewed him as a musician. He is viewed, I've learned from the book, as influencing the beginning of hip-hop. He was influenced by Langston Hughes, but has a very interesting thread from jazz performance through to more modern hip-hop, but a very political bent on all of that.
Interesting. And that's just come out?
It's a older book,
Okay.
but I just checked it out at the library, so it's
Okay.
new to me.
Good.
And then my third book, I love cooking, and there's a book called The Flavor Bible that's more of an encyclopedia than a book, but I reference it every week, and what's interesting is it tells you the ideal flavor combinations for different things that you may be combining, so it allows for lots of innovation in recipes.
We've talked about that. It's like a color palette only for flavor. Is
Yes.
that- yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. And what's the name of it again?
It's called The Flavor Bible.
The Flavor Bible. Okay, good. Everybody go out and get that. Well, Kelty, I've got to say, with everything going on in the state right now and all the challenges we're trying to address and the pressures we're under, it seems like the best thing we have going for us right now is the amazing people working on it that we get to work with. And Texas is lucky to have you. I'm glad you found your way here. And thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be on the show.
That was Kelty Garbee. You've been listening to The Pathfinder. Be sure to join us next week. We'll be talking with Greg Morris, Academic Vice President at El Centro College in Dallas. I hope you can join us for that. If you like this show, tell a friend, subscribe, leave us a review in Apple Podcasts, share one of our episodes on social media. You can visit tccta.org to listen to our shows or grab them in your favorite podcatcher or wherever you found this one. The creator of The Pathfinder is me, Richard Moore. Our producers are Carol Hawkins and Gabriel Zambrano. This has been a production of the Texas Success Center and the Texas Community College Teachers Association. We'll catch you next time on The Pathfinder.